They are finding that, you can read this for yourself, these are some fuel cells that they're experimenting with United Technologies, and it's all based on energy conversion rather than fossil fuel or burning something or whatever. So in other words, this, of course, this technology that we're talking about would be of intense interest to energy executives and anyone who is heavily invested in the energy field. I'm going to here to tell you right now that there is tons of alternative energies out there. The reason we don't have it is because the big guys have not figured out how to get a monopoly on it. If we go to hydrogen, you can take an electrolyzing plate, you can separate, you know, what's water? H2O, 2-part hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. So you can separate that through electrolyzing, and you can get hydrogen. So we could all get enough hydrogen, so, you know, you can't get a monopoly on it. Biodiesel, biofuel. You know, we can all grow some potatoes or corn or whatever, so they couldn't get a lock on it. They're going to fuel cell because they got to figure out what to put in those fuel cells to make them work that we can't get, and then we'll get it. Okay? Y'all live, most of you have lived through the time when the cigarette industry was fighting tooth and toenail, and for every scientific study showing that cigarette smoking was harmful, they had their scientific study showing that, well, their methodology was wrong, or no, it's actually good for you, or whatever. This was a delaying tactic until those giant cigarette companies could diversify. Okay? Today, the big cigarette industries, cigarette sales still into the millions of dollars, is still only a small fraction of their total profits because they diversified in other things. We're in the middle of this now with petroleum. They know the writing's on the wall. They know we need to get away from this, but they've got to drag it out until they can diversify and find a new technology to go with. Slide. Interestingly enough, this dovetails into the ancient stories of the alchemist who are trying to transmute base metals into gold. And we've all heard about that, and probably like me, you snickered at that. Now, poor fools think they can take a piece of lead and transmute it into gold. But you can, if you can learn the secrets of this energy manipulation at the atomic and subatomic level, okay? Because they have taken gold, transmuted it into this white powder, the white powder of gold. And then they have taken the white powder and transmuted it back into a gold nugget. Can be done, all right? But they are just now beginning to crack into this technology and this knowledge. Slide. And again, we find it's nothing new, because in the Bible, we learn about manna. Moses, the manna from heaven, and they said it came from heaven because they'd wake up in the morning and this white powder was strewn all around the ground. Well, you know, and they know nobody came in, there weren't any footprints. Nobody left it there, so it must have dropped from the sky. No, they were producing it on Mount Horeb in the southern Sinai, where back in 1901, Sir William Petrie of archaeological fame in Britain discovered what he called an Egyptian temple. And today they call it the Mount of Moses, and they think this is where Moses went. And I've talked to people who have visited there, and they said within sight of this are some mountains where they have ancient gold mines. And there is a foundry in this facility, and this is where probably they were manufacturing this white powder of gold. In fact, Petrie recorded that when they got there and they tore up the flagstones, they found all this white powder there, but they didn't know what it was. So the wind blew it all away. This is ancient knowledge. They knew how to do this. We learned that Ramesses the Great offers conical white bread to the hawk-headed god of Hathor. And then down here we see Amenhotep III receives the conical Shem-Anah, or the Methus, okay? And all of that basically means the same thing. Manna in ancient Hebrew means, what is it? They didn't know what it was. But certain of the priesthood, some of this knowledge which had been passed down from earlier civilizations had been passed through the priesthood, through the knowledgeable people, and they knew how to do it, but they didn't know what it was. So it was manna. What is it? Slide. You read in Exodus, when the dew had gone up to the face of the wilderness, a fine flake-like thing, fine as hoarfrost on the ground. And when the people of Israel saw it, they said to each other, What is it? Manna. For they did not know what it was, and Moses said to them, it is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. And they would take this powder and they mold it into little cakes and stuff, and they'd eat it. This was the manna that helped them survive in the wilderness all this time. Was this the white powder of gold? Slide. This is really great. When Moses comes down off the mountain, and he'd been gone for a long time, and he'd gotten the commandments and everything, and the children of Israel had gotten pretty impatient, and they were wanting something better than their lot hanging around there. So they knew something about the gold was magical and had real spiritual property. So they gathered all their gold and they built a golden calf and they were worshiping it. When Moses comes down, he got real angry about it, and he says, Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tables out of his hand. He broke them at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf which they had made and burned it with fire, ground it to a powder, and made the children of Israel eat it. Okay? What the heck there? So we have these tantalizing things that this is a technology that was known back as far as biblical times. Slide. And then I've already mentioned Mount Horeb. This is a picture of Mount Horeb, and it holds the ruins which included this smelter where apparently they had been, and where Moses was actually manufacturing the white powder of gold. Slide. And of course, Moses, and we could get into a huge long discussion here, because there seems to be some compelling evidence that Moses is not a name, it's a title, and it means the one true heir to the throne. And that Moses, in actuality, we know from the Bible that Moses was a well-schooled Egyptian. He was a high-ranking Egyptian, and so there's a compelling argument to be made that has been accepted by many people like Mark Twain and Arthur Conan Doyle and many other students of hidden history, that Moses was just kind of a title, and the actual person was Amenhotep III, the Pharaoh, who then had changed his name and incurred the wrath of the Egyptian authorities when he became Akhenaten, the worshiper of the one true God. And that's because he had learned about the one true God through his Hebrew relatives, or the people who had actually raised him, okay? Now, where did the Egyptians learn all this from? From the biblical patriarch Abraham, who had brought the knowledge of Samaria to Egypt. Look in the Bible. Abraham was not a Jew. He was not even a Semite. He came from Ur of the Chaldees. Chaldea was simply an ancient term for Samaria or Mesopotamia, what we now call Iraq. And the city of Ur is still over there, Uruk. A lot of these towns, in fact, most of those cities in ancient Samaria were named after Abraham's relatives. Okay, so Abraham was not just some poor Jew wandering in the desert with a camel in a tent. He was a very prominent and probably royal Sumerian who brought the knowledge of the ancient Sumerians to Egypt. Shortly thereafter, the whole Egyptian civilization sprang full-blown into existence. And what I found in researching Rule by Secrecy is that it was surprising to me. The earliest dynasties of Egypt were the most advanced. So the Egyptian civilization did not start, from a primitive and then build into this exquisite civilization. It started off as an exquisite civilization and then digressed and devolved. And all of it because of the information that goes back to Samaria. Slide. So we can see that Abraham comes from Ur of the Chaldees, goes up to Haran, comes all the way through Canaan, and ends up in Egypt. Slide. All of human history resides in Baghdad because that was the fountain of Western civilization for certain. Slide. The ancient Sumerians obviously knew a lot more than we even give them credit for. In this stele, we see that they made a representation of the solar system, correctly depicting not only the number of the planets, but the relationship of their size. This stele dates back probably about 6,000 years, far beyond the time of the Egyptians. It also shows Uranus and Neptune. Uranus was not discovered until 1781. Neptune